Welcome back to the fourth installment. So far, we have located Rebecca. We followed her through to her life in Panama. We understand now that Stephen is Clarence's father. So now it's time for us to follow Stephen on his voyage to a new land and see whatever became of him. This is Daily Departed, where I navigate through the information that I was given to try to put together the pieces of my maternal grandfather's story. His name was Clarence Wellesley Booth. And so now we have located his father, and Clarence's father's name is Stephen Bowen. This is Stephen Bowen's actual signature, which again I think is really cool just to see. Probably I need a handwriting specialist or something so that we can look more into this, but for the sake of time, let's continue. Now I came across Stephen Bowen's birth certificate. These were some real short form birth certificates back in the day. Once again, he is in the right location. He's in Petersfield, Westmoreland. We see his parents here are Charles Bowen, and they are in Waterworks, which is a subsection of Petersfield in Westmoreland. We see when he is born. We see his mother's name. So let's continue on. Stephen Emmanuel Bowen was born on March the 20th, 1887 to Charles and Ella Bowen. And Ella's maiden name was Williams, and it got changed to Bowen. In Waterworks, Westmoreland, on the island of Jamaica. At the time of birth, Stephen's father, Charles, worked as a blacksmith. And so when you look at some of these things, it says father, and then it says father's occupation, and you see blacksmith here. So let's continue. This is the marriage document or the marriage registrar paper between Ellen and Charles. So this is Stephen's parents' marriage papers, and they were married in 1882. And this is how I'm able to put together a lot of the pieces, because once you find something like a birth certificate or you find something like a marriage paper, it gives you the next generation. And from this, I was able to see that David Bowen was Charles Bowen's father, and Lewis Williams was Ellen Williams' father. So Stephen's parents, Charles and Ella, wed 5 years earlier on January 26, 1882. According to calculations, Stephen and Rebecca would have conceived Clarence in August of 1909. And I know it seems like I'm jumping, but I just wanted to confirm that his parents were married, and this would have set the precedent for how he is to look at the things that he's doing in his life, right? And what types of pressure may have been applied because he's going a different way. And so he impregnates, according to the record, Rebecca, whose parents are also married, and they also have other children. And instead of marrying Rebecca, he leaves to New York City. And that's what the records indicate. The record indicate that shortly after his birth, which is Clarence's birth, Stephen leaves. So this is one of the records here that shows Stephen Bowen on a census in New York City. At this time, he is a lodger, right? And if you look closely, you will see Stephen Bowen, lodger, and then you see male, and then you see 30 years old, and then you see 1911 is when this column is when did you arrive? It says 1911. And it also asks about when did you get citizenship? And then it says, or naturalized, it says 1918, which starts to become a problem later on in this conversation, but let's continue. Let me just say it opens up more questions. So that was a 1920 census. We see Mary there as early as 1920. So he would have been in the country at least 9 years by this time, because the census is saying that he arrived in 1911. Now, I cannot, as of yet, find the marriage certificate for him and Mary, but we do see them together on a number of censuses. So that I think is important to note that Rebecca leaves 2 years after Clarence is born, and Stephen left 1 year. So did his leaving prompt her to leave? I don't know. United States of America Declaration of Intention. And this is Stephen's paperwork. At this time, he's 34, so this is a little after the 1920 census. And he is giving information about how he got here, coming from Jamaica, West Indies, and when he was born and where he's living, okay? And the information that he gave, the 161 West 104th Street, today's Google Maps, shout out to Google Maps, shows this is the building that he would have lived in, because this building is as old as, I believe, 1910. So this would have been the actual building that he lived in. If we go back for 1 second, we see that he names 161 West 140th Street in New York. Right, so this would have been Harlem. He married an American woman named Mary, and this is his intention to file. Let me go back. I think I jumped a little bit. This is his intention, and we see 161 West 104th Street, New York, New York. Right, we see it again here. But this is where it gets interesting, because he says he immigrated to the United States of America from Antigua, Cuba on the vessel the Jagus. This is what he said. And his last foreign residence was in Cuba. Okay, he says he's married and the woman's name is Mary and she lives in New York with him. And then he also says that he arrived in the port at New York and on the 4th of 1914, but we just saw a 1920 census that he says he arrived in 1911. So I don't know what's going on in that respect, but this, nonetheless, this would have been the apartment building that he would have been living in during that time. Next time I go to New York, I must take a trip uptown. Okay, some years later, he again petitions for naturalization. The first one was the intent to stay. The second one was a petition for naturalization. And on this one, he's saying the same thing, that he came through Cuba, but the name of the boat or the vessel that he came upon is different. This one says the Danube. So it's kind of like saying I came into New York and I came on JetBlue, and in actuality, you came on Delta, right? I don't know what's going on in this respect, but what we see in this particular petition is the update that Mary is still there, but now there is a Clarence born October the 14th, 1924 in New York. If we can remember, my grandfather's name was Clarence, but he left Clarence back in Westmoreland. And he has a child some 14 years later, and he names this child Clarence. Ooh. Okay, and so this is Stephen Bowen's signature. This is his affidavit, witness paperwork for him to get his U.S. naturalization. And what does this indicate to us? That he doesn't have any intention at this time to go back to Jamaica, right? It doesn't show any intention of going back to live. Sometimes when you become a citizen here, you have to give up your citizenship there, right? So let's continue. Mary, his wife, was born in Baltimore, Maryland on March the 10th, 1901. So Stephen was considerably older than Mary. Stephen is born in 1887. Mary is born in 1901. And I got that information from the census. Again, they have one child that I know of, and his name is Clarence. And he's born sometime after, I don't know how far after. We do see them together in 1920, and he's born in 1924, okay? And this is another census. I believe this is the 1930 census, and we're still seeing them together. So him and Mary are together to stay, okay? So once again, she appears on the 1930 census. He is a porter at a store on this census. That's where he's working. And I believe her occupation is a housewife or a work at home or stay at home mother. Now, this is when things become even more complicated, because I guess during the process of looking for his paperwork of his port of entry, they're looking for it and they're not able to find it. And what they did was they put these two documents together, because the details of Stephen's application reflects the details of this person, but this person is named Stephen Mackenzie. And all of the other details, date of arrival, those details are the same in 1914. The Danby vessel. However, the surname, the last name, this name is Mackenzie and his name is Bowen. Don't understand how that mix-up happened, but that's the situation with that. So we're unsure as to whether or not Stephen Bowen ever got his paperwork or ever got his citizenship in America, because shortly after, in the year of 1936, May, Stephen Bowen dies. And he dies at a very young age, at the age of 46. I mean, we consider that young in this day and time. And he passes away, and most notably, he passes away 4 days after his son's birthday. So his son would have turned 26. His first son, which is Clarence, who, if we can remember, was born May the 20th, and Stephen passes away May the 24th, 26 years later. So his son, my grandfather, would have been 26 when he lost his father. And the address that he passes away at is 104 Lenox Avenue. So he's still around the same area. He's still in and around the same area. And we also see the location. So this is 104 Lenox. And as we see, this was built in 1910. So it had 22 units and 6 stories. He would have been living at this apartment complex. And if I can remember correctly, according to the narrative, he passed away waiting for his wife. That's one of the things that I did get when I asked my aunt. Shout out to her, because she has a photographic memory. And so the little bit of information that we did have, we had to go to the librarian, is what I call her now. So shout out to my Aunt Janet. She was able to relate to us that one of the stories that he did hear of his father's passing is that he passed waiting for his wife, whatever that meant. So one might assume that he actually passed at home. And if he did, this would have been the location. So with that said, stay tuned, because we're about to wrap this up. We are about to wrap this up. So stay tuned to find out whatever happened to Clarence, whatever happened to his wife, Kathleen, and whatever happened to their children. Until next time.